Editing feminist writing is like walking on a tightrope. Feminist journalism is radical, in your face, and at times aggressive. Feminist writers want to fight for their cause, and that is often done in a way that doesn't appeal to mainstream readers. So, it's the editor's job to make the writing appeal to the average Sunday morning newsreader. Publications have risen that function strictly as a feminist medium, but other websites such as The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Economist have started to publish feminist articles that appeal to mainstream readers. Feminist journalism as a genre is full of contrast. During this tutorial, we will look at articles from Jezebel, The Guardian, and Mother Jones to see how contrast is used in feminist editing. Then we will look at some of the many hurdles that editors of feminist writing face and how they overcome them. The first article we will jump into is from Jezebel. It is first important to note that Jezebel is an electronic feminist news publication whose staff is primarily female. The first point of contrast in the article is the picture. This is a radical picture. There is a bra being burned, but through the use of the colors blue, white, and black, the picture doesn't appear to be as profound. Next is voice. This element of contrast is very apparent in this article. The author is very blunt, cheeky, and at times provocative, while also being factual and informative. Her tone switches between shamelessly bashing the patriarchy to citing factual evidence and court cases. Next is an article from The Guardian. Without looking at specific examples, it is important to note that this article is very tame compared to the previous one. Editors of The Guardian are mainly men. This article would arguably appeal to more mainstream readers because it doesn't use overly aggressive language and tone. The first point of contrast in this article is in its page design. There is a strategic use of orange borders and letters. The orange theme is carried throughout the article and makes it eye-catching for the reader. The most notable area of contrast in the article is the sentence structure. The article contains declarative, interrogative, and exclamatory sentences, as well as compound, complex, and simple sentences. In the paragraph in red, simple and complex sentences are used. The author also uses many quotes throughout the article. The quotes are italicized in gray, which is a contrast to the black body paragraphs in the article. From an editorial standpoint, this adds visual dimension. The last example is from Mother Jones, another feminist electronic publication. The page design and use of color in this article is bold, which is common in feminist articles. The title is placed in a black background with the word sex bolded in orange. This is a strategic use of contrast. There is also bold typography at the start of most paragraphs. The article contains many pictures that are colorful and strategically placed to prevent walls of text from covering the page. Lastly, the article contains graphs that have colors that correspond to the orange letters in the heading. Having looked at examples of contrast in feminist journalism, it's time to look at issues that editors face when it comes to contrast and how to combat those problems. First, when looking into the journalism profession as a whole, it is a journalist's job to be objective and fair. Objective meaning that when covering hard news, journalists don't convey their own feelings. This is done by using a language that is neutral and avoids characterizing people or institutions in a particular way. And fair meaning that a journalist must recognize that there are two sides, if not more, to every story. Now, this is a rule of thumb for mainstream journalists, but for feminist journalism, this is the opposite. Feminist journalism is objective and passionate. Writers are fighting for their cause, and when it comes to being fair, the patriarchy usually gets the short end of the stick. Feminist journalism as a genre in itself is a contrast. From an editing standpoint, in-your-face feminist writing is a hurdle that editors must combat. Deborah Chambers, Linda Steiner, and Carol Fleming, in their journal Women in Journalism, discuss from an editing standpoint language, which translates to the contrast of voice. They say that it is always an issue in editing. The women explain that often feminists have a tone and voice that doesn't appeal to all readers. A caveat to this being that if a publication is explicitly written for females, but for editors of mainstream publications, they have to censor the author while still holding true to the intentions of the journalist. The use of pictures in page design is also a common issue for editors. A trick used in feminist journalism is using outlandish pictures to catch attention in order to get mainstream readers to pay attention to their cause. But again, there is a recurring issue of being too aggressive. So, when page design, pictures, and voice are all potentially too radical for mainstream readers, how do editors combat this problem? Editor and writer Patricia Levy says that in order to be accessible and of interest to broad audiences, authors and editors connect to popular culture and current events in their writing. So instead of editors publishing what mainstream readers would consider to be radical pictures, they put pictures of Beyonce, Emma Watson, and Mindy Kaling within their articles to attach a well known pop culture icon to their cause. Editors of feminist journalism also weave dialogue about shows with strong female characters, such as Broad City, Ensign Amy Schumer, and Jessica Jones, into their articles in order to connect to mainstream readers. It is tricks of contrast in pictures, page design, and voice that enable editors of feminist journalism to walk the tightrope of appealing to mainstream readers. Throughout this video, we have looked at examples of contrast in feminist journalism, and then observed ways that editors of feminist journalism struggle when it comes to contrast, and then lastly learned of ways that they combat those struggles.